And then there was the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, which was conceived for television. It was shown in 1957 with Julie Andrews in the title role, which has been shown recently again on television. It's the most charming thing we've ever seen. But then a new version was made in 1965 with Leslie Ann Warren, and that's the one that I remember as a child, which was rerun for many years for about 10 years. And these things helped to popularize the story and undoubtedly create interest in Rossini's version, but once people were exposed to it, they were quickly convinced of his own genius in treating it and writing beautiful music for it. As far as the story go, versions of the story go back to antiquity. This idea of this poor oppressed woman, oppressed by her family, this poor girl oppressed by her family, who is able to get out of the situation and by marrying a prince who chooses her for her goodness. And it's a wonderful story that gives hope to the oppressed. That's what it's supposed to do. But there is also an obligation on the part of the oppressed to suffer oppression with grace, to show grace under pressure, not to complain, and above all, to forgive, which she does once she achieves the marriage to the prince, and she is the most important young lady in the entire country that she lives in. She has not one thought for getting revenge upon the evil stepsisters or her evil stepmother. The only thought she has is to forgive them and to advance their own social position. So there's more than just achieving this vindication of your goodness. It is also incumbent upon you to forgive your oppressors. And that's the beauty of the Cinderella story. And I think all of us feel like Cinderella at times. I was lucky enough, never in my family, I never felt like Cinderella. But in professional life, one often feels like Cinderella. And, her behavior is a major challenge to me. But just in spite of all of the versions of this story, the one that is best known, and this opera is based on, and also the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, and also the Disney film, is one by Charles Perrault, whose name is spelled on the synopsis handout, which says La Cinderella ossia le bontan trionfo. And he was a French nobleman, a bureaucrat, also an author who lived between 1628 and 1703. And he lost his job in the French government when he was in his 60s, and he published his famous collection of tales, the Tales of Mother Goose, they were called. That's 1697, and they were freshened up versions of pre-existent fairy tales, and they include this one. There was Little Red Riding Hood, Sleeping Beauty, there was Puss in Boots, Bluebeard, but I think the most popular of all is Cinderella, Cendrillon, ou Le Petit Pantoufle de Verre, that's the original title, as given on the handout. You may be curious, there is also a Grimm Brothers version of this story, but it's really quite unsavory. You think I'm making that up. But as many of the Grimm Brothers stories are. So in that story, the stepsisters have a scheme to get the sliver on. They cut off parts of their feet, so the sliver will fit. But there are two magic pigeons that inform the prince of their scheme. And then the pigeons, out of revenge, they come out and pick out their eyes so that they're blinded. So it's quite, yeah, it's really. So you don't hear that one yet. You don't hear about that. As far as the Perrault version goes, let me tell you, it is exquisitely charming. And the French is so beautiful, it's so simple, it's so elegant. And I felt so strongly about this. There is no story where you could ever love Cinderella more, the way he tells it. There is no way you could hate the stepsisters more. There is no way you could love the godmother more. There is no way that you could ever be more charmed by her magic than if you do read the original in the original language. So I felt so strongly about that I made copies for anyone who wants them with a literal English translation included. Because I know I taxed the patience of the Minnesota Opera with all of my demands for photocopies. So I made these my own arrangement because I didn't think everyone would be interested. But believe me, if you even have a basic knowledge of French, you'll be very charmed by the language, understand it easily. And I hate to tell it, but as they say, the translation does not do it justice. As a language teacher once told me, English does not have the means to express the effect of the original. But yeah, it's emotional for me to even to read it. It's very special. It's justly deserved its fame. It's justly deserved. And so there are two things that people don't know about the original story, that if they're not familiar with it, they're a little surprised by it. And one thing is that Cinderella's father is alive. She does have a father. And he's alive through the whole thing. But they removed him from the Disney film, and they removed him from the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, and I know why. It's pretty obvious. It's because he's a milquetoast. He's a weak man. And I can tell you that they would not want to portray in these dramatizations a man who is completely ruled by his wife, as he is portrayed, and was not, as the phrase would go, man enough to stand up to her and protect his own daughter. So they just portray him as dead, but there is a father in the real story. And then the other thing is that there are two sessions of the ball. She goes twice to the ball. She goes one time and charms everyone, and then she goes again, but it's the second time she goes that she turns into a wench again, and leaves the slipper behind. That's the second time she goes. But both times they're enchanted by this mysterious person. I think it's a good reform just to condense it into one. But our opera has two. Let's see. Little is known, as far as the circumstances of the first performance of this opera, there's very little known, and little known about the choice of the subject. Rossini had been contracted for the Teatro Valle in Rome late in 1816 for a new opera that was supposed to be done in the Carnival of 1817. Carnival was the time of year that was most popular for operatic productions. It's the time just before Lent. And they would usually start the operas on December 26th. It's usually as quick as they could after Christmas. And that's what they were supposed to do for this opera, but he couldn't finish it in time. He was delayed in Naples until the first week of December of 1816 to see the premiere of his opera Otello, which I hate to report is not as good as Verdi's, but it's still a good opera. And by that time, even by late December, no subject had been chosen for the opera that was supposed to be given in Carnival. And this was supposed to be finished by the end of December. It was supposed to be finished by Christmas. According to the librettist, the subject was suggested by Rossini himself when they had a meeting, and that they went over 2 or 3 dozen possible topics that were all rejected by one or both for one reason or another, and then impulsively he blurted out Cinderella, and then they did treat that one. This story was recently treated by other composers who are mentioned on your handout. There was Pavesi, and then a French composer, Issoire, and the librettist did make reference to the setting by Pavesi. And he took some shortcuts. He reused some music from earlier operas, which is perfectly acceptable procedure from the time. And it was first performed in January 25th, 1817, after being worked on for only a month, only a few weeks. Similarly to The Barber of Seville, which was also rushed in production the same way. It had a rather noisy, messy premiere because the Roman audiences were famed for being unruly, just like the year before with The Barber of Seville. But it very quickly became very popular. Now, for the synopsis, we can go over a number of things. The title, Cenerentola, that comes from the Italian word for cinders, or ashes, which is cenere. So she's the little cinder girl, la Cenerentola. And there are a number of differences with the version of the story that we know. Cinderella is wonderful to talk about because the story is almost universally known to audiences, but unfortunately there are some variations that upset people. Some of the favorite incidents and characters are not seen at all. And one of the most important ones is there's no glass slipper, which is a tremendous disappointment. There's no glass slipper in the opera. And there is a reason for it, an important reason for it, which was explained in the original libretto when it came out, which is the Pope. It was the Pope who wouldn't let that be done. They did it in a subtle way. They said that showing a slipper would not be in the traditional Roman tradition, but what they meant was that on stage it would be impermissible to have a woman showing her ankles, or trying on a slipper, or showing anything.